Welcome to the 24th Annual Capital Conference, virtual edition. It's our goal that each of our sessions for the conference will be about an hour in length. We may go a little longer, or may go a little shorter in some cases, depending on the particular session. The title of this session is The Overview for Our High School Science Contest, presented by our State Contest Directors for Science, Dr. Michelle McGehee, who is our Biology Director, Dr. Brian Anderson for Chemistry, and Dr. David Bixler for Physics. So thanks to each of you for being willing to share your time and your knowledge and expertise with our attendees in this new and exciting format that we're working with this year. And I will now turn it over to our presenters.
All right, thanks, David. I head down here to share screen. Boop, 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 boop. Bring this thing up. Boop. Hey, there we go. Okay, now I got to close you guys out because you're covering up part of my thing here. We let these people in from the waiting room. Trying to get all the little pop-up boxes off my screen over here.
Yes, Jessica and I will take care of the waiting room.
Okay. All right, so welcome to our virtual COVID-19 free Capital Conference in 2020. Today what we're going to do, it's an introduction to the UIL Science Contest. We're going to talk about the contest in general, and then we'll have a brief overview of each separate part of it. But coming up, we've got a session devoted to each area of the exam. So tomorrow at 1 p.m., Dr. David Bixler, there he is, the champion. He's going to be doing his session on physics, where he'll talk about what his process is for coming up with problems. And I think that'll help you guys as coaches. If you understand what we're doing, I hope that will help you to help your students better. And then I'm up a week from today doing chemistry, and then the following Monday, Michelle McGehee will be doing the biology in-depth session. All of these will be recorded on Zoom. They'll all be posted on the UIL website. There's a link down here for the Capital Conference online. All right. This is so weird. Not, normally, okay, anybody got any questions? But I'm just going to spew. And if you've got a question, type something in the chat box. David, are you watching the chat box? So if something comes up that we should stop and address it, let me know.
Yes, I'll be watching the chat box through the session.
All right, so here we are. There's our new introduction screen. So these are the science directors, Michelle McGehee, Brian Anderson, and David Bixler. And I'm now in my third year, starting my third year of doing this. Michelle and David have been doing it a few years longer. I don't know if you guys, yeah, they're still muted. Okay, I'll just talk about them instead of talking with them. But they'll be up later on. All right, so
I'm content to let you talk for now.
All right. So the purpose of the UIL exams, everybody wants to go to state. Everybody wants to win a medal. Most of the students will not go to state. Most of the students will not win a medal. And so what we're thinking about when we make up these exams is how are we going to benefit all of the students, not just the ones who win the medals. That's great. But the ones who don't should also benefit from this experience. We know you guys are putting in so much time and so much effort and even so much money in some cases. And so we want to make this as profitable, as rewarding for the students as we can. So when we're writing up these tests, what we're thinking about, we want to challenge the students in basic fundamental principles of science. And this last bullet point here, help prepare students for the rigor of college level courses, that's the big payoff. As far as I'm concerned, every student who participates in UIL should do better in college as a result of it. And the problem is that's such a delayed reward. They want to see the rewards right now, but the biggest reward is really going to be when they get to college and they ace chemistry or biology or physics because their preparation in UIL and the work that you did with them prepared them to succeed in college. So the second bullet point then, promote learning in biology, chemistry, and physics. We're assuming the kids are already interested in learning these sciences or they wouldn't be doing this. We want to make sure we don't beat that out of them. We want to keep them interested and keep them motivated. Foster a sense of enthusiasm about advanced topics and reaching beyond the scope of high school chemistry, even sometimes beyond the scope of a freshman level, introductory level science class. Because I'll tell you, the questions that I put on my exams, I expect the best of my general chemistry students at the University of Texas would be able to do all of these problems. But the rank and file freshman chemistry students I have would not get 100 on my chemistry tests, because I put questions, when we get to the state test, the questions are going to be much more challenging than what I would normally give my students in class.
Brian, I'm going to chime in and say that for biology, that's exactly the same thing. The questions that I put on some of the lower tests, like the district level, that might be something that you find at the college at the freshman level, but the sophomore level courses in college, even the state test is probably a little beyond what I would give my sophomores at the college level. So it can be very rigorous.
And this goes beyond AP chemistry, AP biology, AP physics. An introductory science course at a university will go beyond the AP curriculum, and so do these exams. So expect that as you advance through this contest, you as coaches are going to see problems that you don't know how to solve because you've never seen that kind of thing before. Don't feel bad if that happens to you. I expect that's going to happen to you. And for chemistry, I write up detailed explanations of how to solve the problems because I expect you're going to see things on the chemistry part, at least, that you probably haven't seen before. I try to do that to keep things fresh and keep things challenging and challenge even the brightest kids at the most advanced schools. All right, and I'll tell you this too, in my office hours, a lot of times I have students ask questions and I'll come up with ideas that they're really cool problem ideas, but I don't dare put that on one of my own exams because it'll kill everybody. But I can put it on the state exam for chemistry, so I do that. All right, so the contest itself is one big exam. The first 20 questions are going to be biology, and they're labeled B1 through B20. Then the chemistry questions are C1 through C20, and then physics are P1 through P20. So it's one big exam, but it is clearly broken down into different sections. The competition is a team competition by school, but it's also an individual competition. So we award medals and advancement to the best teams and to the best individual scorers. And also it's broken down like the highest chemistry scores and the highest physics scores and the highest biology scores. So if you have a student who's maybe a starting sophomore and they are amazing at biology because they had it as a freshman, but they haven't had physics yet, and they're just starting chemistry, they can still participate and they can still be competitive by competing in the biology portion only. And we have students who do that in every section. Not as many in physics because the students normally reach that later in their curriculum, but we have students who come in and they will only take the chemistry part or only take the biology or physics part. Covers a broad range of knowledge. When we get to the chemistry part, you'll see there's 13 different topic areas. Those are all the topic areas we cover at UT in a full year. We cover that in the full year. Now these exams, the UIL exams, they start in January. So we know you guys have only covered half of a high school curriculum, and we're going to start testing the kids on a full year of material in the middle of the year. So there will be things they haven't seen yet. That's going to happen to all these kids. So here's the structure. All of the questions are multiple choice. There's a total of 60 questions, 20 in each category. The way the scoring works, there is a penalty for guessing. So you get 6 points for each correct answer. You leave it blank, there's no penalty or no points. And if you guess wrong, you lose 2 points. Now, until we get to the state exam, all of the questions will have 5 choices, A through E. So if you can eliminate 2 of those answers, if you don't know what the right answer is, but you can eliminate 2 of them as wrong answers, then statistically, you might as well guess, because you'll get 6 points if you're right, you'll lose 2 points if you're wrong. On average, you would end up evening out the points you get versus the points you lose. If you can't eliminate any answers, don't guess. If you can only eliminate 1, don't guess. If you can eliminate 2, that's where you're right on the statistical borderline. You're just as well off guessing as not guessing. But if you can eliminate 3 of the 5 choices, you're better off guessing. Statistically, you will raise your score by guessing. And that's part of the test taking strategy, is if you don't know what the right answer is, are there any answers I can eliminate as wrong? And sometimes you can do it just by looking at units. Sometimes you'll be given a question, you'll be given 5 numbers, and if they don't all have the same units, what are the units on your answer? Because any of them that have the wrong units are wrong. You can cross them out and you might be able to guess, even if you have no idea how to do the problem. What we want the students to do is, after each exam, we want them to have learned something. So if they go into invitational A and they come away and there were a couple of problems they didn't know how to do, maybe they'll learn how to do those problems. They'll have an interest in solving that, and it'll make them better prepared for the next one. And it says the best possible answer is the correct answer. Sometimes you're going to have answers and you're not sure, well, it could be both of these under this certain particular condition, it could be E, but all the rest of the time it would be D, then pick D. And sometimes, and we do sometimes make mistakes. So if something seems like it's weird, you guys will be given all of the answers and all of the explanations before the exam or when the exam starts. So you'll be able to look at that and say, are they sure that one's right? All right, on all of the exams up to state, we'll have A through E as our answers. When we get to state, we can have any number of answers. And sometimes, I don't know, David, do you ever go to F? Whoops, I went backwards. Do you ever go to F?
I do occasionally go to F because there's a lot of answers, a lot of situations in physics where you need even numbers of choices. So, 7 meters per second left, 7 meters per second right, 10 meters per second left, 10 meters per second right. So eventually it comes out I needed an even number of choices. A through E doesn't really give me that. So there's times I will go to F at the state. I don't do that before state. I just leave one of them off, but at state I can go all the way through F. I don't go much past that usually.
For biology, it's mostly 5. There's really not the same limitations, I think, with physics and all that you guys have. You have this right and left business thing that's going on. But for biology, occasionally I have gone through F on the state test, but usually not. That's usually not the norm. So you still have 5 answer choices for biology.
I might. I don't know if I've ever gone to F before the state exam, but sometimes you have paired answers like Dr. Bixler was talking about. You've got the positive and negative analog. And so, if your choices are +1, -1, +2, -2, +3, -3, there's really only 3 answer choices, but then you've got to make sure you've got the sign right. With 5 answers, we can't do that. So it starts to point the students toward the right answer if you're not able to pair them up like that. I don't know if I've ever gone to F on one before the state exam, though. We try not to.
I never have before the state exam. I always hold off until I get to state. But
all right. And then the numerical answers do not have to have a certain distance apart. We like to keep them reasonably apart so that if a student has rounding error in a calculation, it doesn't end up, right between 2 numbers, or worse yet, on the wrong number as a result of rounding error. That won't happen, but the answers can be fairly tightly packed together. We don't want students being able to eyeball it and necessarily, especially at the more advanced exams, just eyeball it and pick one because it's the only one in the ballpark.
So this is one where I also am very careful as I write out different wrong ways to work the problem. If one of the wrong ways lands within 1 or 2% of another answer, I won't use that one. I don't always get exactly to 5%. Sometimes it's 4.8% off, but I try to keep them 5% or greater if possible, or very, very close to that. I'm not going to put answers that are 1% or 2% apart. That's just simply too close given the possibilities of rounding errors. So that 5% is kind of what I shoot for. Sometimes it's just a little under that, but that is the goal, at least, that or greater.
And most of the time what we do when we can is we look at what are the most common errors students will make, and then those are going to be the alternative answers, the distractors. So it's not like we pick a number and then go 5% above and below all the time. We look at what are the most common errors, and let's make those the wrong answers. And so they usually don't fall within 1%. A lot of times they're like way the heck out in left field somewhere. But sometimes the right answer is the one that's way out in left field somewhere. So these are the dates. These are tentative dates right now, especially for the invitational meets. The invitational meets, they're practice, they're preseason games. They don't count for anything. The official UIL season begins with the district meet, which is the week of March 22nd. The regional meet is on a weekend, and then the state meet is going to be, again, the last weekend in April, spilling into May. And these dates are tentative right now. I'm sure with the COVID-19 thing, I'm not sure if we can nail everything down the way we'd like to, but these are the dates, the working dates we have right now. Okay, anybody, you want to do this, Michelle?
I'm happy to do this, Brian.
Go ahead.
All right, so I'll just kind of let you flip through. You don't have to give me the screen or anything, but competitions are separated out by division. So all of the schools are categorized as division 1A through 6A. So even though everybody is taking the same exact test, doesn't matter which school you're at, you're going to take the exact same test, but you are competing against individuals that are at the same school level as you are. So if you are in a 2A school, you are only competing and advancing based on 2A. And that's going to be true all the way up through the state competition. So again, at state, everybody is taking the same test, but again, you're only competing, or your students are only competing against the same division. Each high school can enter 6 contestants at the district meet. And then if there are 3 contestants, that's going to constitute a team. And so advancing to the next level, there's going to be first, second, and third place overall scores. Overall means the entire test, including all 3 sections, the biology, chemistry, and physics. And then the top score in each subject area can also advance. So there will be a high score in biology, the top score in physics, and the top score in chemistry that can all advance. And then the top team by combined score will also advance. And then of course there's the wild card team, and that can't be figured out until everybody in that, I forget how that works. It always confuses me, but once all of the districts and the regions compete, or depending on which level you're at, then the next highest score for team will advance as the wild card. Correct? Russell, Dr. David Russell?
Yes, it's the top second place team within each region in terms of team score, and then the top second place team within each division to advance to state as the wild card.
Okay. So the contest is hard. We know that. We know that we have to write questions that some students who have more resources, because they're maybe at a 6A school, would have more access to those resources than students perhaps at a 1A, but everybody is competing on the same test. And so we have to be able to sort of delineate that, which is why we'll have a good mix of questions that we write to make sure that we can delineate the scores for those students that have more resources, but we're hopefully not making it so difficult that the 1A students can't answer something that's on there and have been exposed to some of that information as well. The top scores at the state contest are pretty close to being perfect in each subject area. I don't remember what happened last year. I don't think that biology had a 100%. I don't recall physics or chemistry. Do you guys remember?
Physics had in the 5A, there was a 100% at the state level.
Okay.
Perfect score. I don't think there was at 6A.
I don't recall what happened in biology. Too much has happened since then. So again, I'm going to reiterate, there needs to be a clear-cut winner. And so again, that's why we build the questions the way that we do on the contest, so that we would love to give everybody, A's. We would love to give everybody 100% on these and medals, but it is a competition, so we need to be able to have a clear-cut winner in this. On occasion, there are ties. There are tie-breaking procedures that we can use, but sometimes there are true ties and we can't actually break them. I've already mentioned the fourth bullet point there, that all schools will compete, or all divisions will compete with the same contest. So again, everybody's taking the same test, but the scores are only compared with schools from the same division. So you're only competing against your own division. And one thing we want to let the students know, and the coaches too, is don't be discouraged. There are, of course, other benefits for this besides winning the medal. Of course, that's excellent if you can win a medal and you can advance through the various levels. But the benefits of this are that the students and the coaches are all being exposed to the information. And these are things that maybe could be pulled into the classroom, or maybe the students, hopefully what we hope is that they won't get so discouraged and say, oh, I'm completely giving up on science. I don't like this anymore. I'm not doing well at it. Instead, they will look at the questions that they got wrong and think, oh, shoot, maybe I should have done it this way. Or, oh, yes, I remember how that goes. And so we don't want to discourage anybody. We really want to encourage everybody to go into science. But the test is going to be very difficult. Brian, if you want to move forward for me.
That's one of our biggest challenges, is that we have to challenge the smartest kids at the biggest schools that have the most resources, but at the same time, we have to serve the kids who are at the smaller schools that don't have those resources. So it's an amazing range of students that we're trying to serve, all of them at the same time, challenging the ones at the biggest schools and still meeting the needs of the kids at the lower school, the smaller schools, who are enthusiastic about science, and we don't want to beat that out of them. So it's a balancing act for us here too.
And we're doing that in 20 questions each. So can get quite interesting to build the questions. I will let Dr. Bixler handle this one.
I'll take this one because I wanted to add on to that. You know, you don't see a disparity, I don't think, quite as large as you see in any subject except physics, where we have students at a Math Science Academy 6A who've taken AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, or IB Physics, competing on the same test as a freshman who hasn't even finished IPC yet at a school out here, well, where I'm at in rural West Texas. So, you know, it's a little hard, but I try to build the test so that there are questions that everybody has a chance to answer. And there's a question or two that will challenge even the best. So on this one, you have, the students will have 2 hours to take the exam. So from the time that they are allowed to open the exam, clock is set, they have 2 hours. They must remain for 30 minutes. So if they go through, they decide they're just going to answer the physics questions, then they might finish in 15 minutes. They still have to wait around until the 30-minute mark. At that point, they may turn in their exam and leave. During the exam, after we get started and everything, if they raise their hand, we will bring them scratch paper. There are no questions during the exam. You do not ask a question during the exam. You raise your hand, you get scratch paper. You need something, you get scratch paper. You raise your hand, do anything, make any kind of noise, make any kind of gesture, we're just going to bring you scratch paper. The good news about that is you have a ton of scratch paper. You have lots of it. So working out physics problems, working out chemistry problems, drawing structures for biology, you got plenty of paper. There's no reason to make it tiny. You can make your free body force diagrams a full page if you would like. You don't have tape, so you can't tape it together, but I think making it as large as possible is really awesome. At the end of 2 hours, it's just like any other type of standardized exam. Time is called, you put your pencils down and turn in whatever your exam, wherever you're at. So anything left blank, of course, doesn't count against you, doesn't count for you. Now here's the list of calculators that we allow in the exam. So this list, the first 3 have been around for a long time. years and years and years ago, a long time ago, we went to a system where we got rid of all the graphing calculators and everything and went to just the simple single line scientific calculators. They're affordable. A lot of math classrooms had many of these already, class sets of them. They're usually less than $10, and they didn't have so much computational power. They weren't like little bitty computers. So they were fair across the board. This last year, for the 2020 season, we added a 2-line calculator. It was requested by a large number of people. Number of schools had these. We added it, and then we didn't really get to see what happens with it. So I guess we'll find that out in the 2021 season. But those 4 calculators are the ones that are allowed. Anything more powerful than those is not going to be allowed in the contest. We simply don't want little computers coming in there that are going to do everything for you, or that have massive amounts of memory. You have to clear everything, all of that kind of stuff. So stick with these simple scientific calculators, but you can now have a 2-line scientific calculator. We'll see how that goes.
And these are the exact models that are allowed. So it's not just any 1-line calculator. It's got to be one of these. If it's not one of these, we won't let you use it on the exam.
With the possible exception that I would allow you to bring in a 4-function calculator, just a little simple add, subtract, multiply, and divide of any brand. It only did 4 functions, but you're not going to get terribly far with only 4 functions. So
I had a student come in and take a test once with a little Hello Kitty calculator that beeped every time she pushed a button.
okay, we don't want that. We don't know.
All right,
All of the biology textbooks. So there's a go-to book that I have when I need inspiration, and it's usually this one. The Campbell book has been around for a really long time. In fact, when I took freshman Bio 1 and Bio 2 in college, it was the Campbell book. It wasn't the 10th or 11th edition. It was a little earlier, maybe not by far, but a little earlier edition than those. But I would recommend that if you are looking at the Campbell book, that you would go for the most recent edition as possible. The reason being is that in the past I have asked questions on taxonomy, and some of that changed and was not addressed yet in the Campbell book until the most recent edition. The 11th edition, I think, is the most recent. Actually, there might be a 12th edition out by now. And so if you are wanting the most updated taxonomy, go to the most updated Campbell book. And that's probably true for not just Campbell, but some of the other freshman biology books as well. But again, this is my go-to book. There are other textbooks out there. You could certainly find the Campbell book around places like Half Price Books, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think of resources where you can find some things. Probably find an older edition. Most of it's going to be okay, with the exception, as I've already mentioned, of the taxonomy, the changes with the supergroups and whatnot. But also some of the more advanced techniques in molecular biology and biotechnology are going to be a lot different in the earlier editions than what we have out more recently. Go ahead and switch, Brian. One of the other textbooks that I mentioned just a bit ago was Macmillan's Life, and this one is a really easy book to read, a fairly easy book to read. Campbell is very dense, is very heavy. This book is the one that my college switched to for some of the freshman biology courses, and the students really like it. The readability is nice. It has extra problems in it that you don't see in the Campbell book. So it's just another resource that faculty could go to and teachers could go to. I think this was the last one for the biology texts, but there are others out there. Raven has one. McGraw-Hill, sorry. There's a book with the author Raven. That would be an option. They're going to have, if they're for freshman college, they're going to have basically what you need to be able to help the students through the biology portion. I just tend to gravitate towards Campbell because it's the one that has been sort of in my life the longest, I think. So it tends to be my go-to. Go ahead and switch.
Ooh, come on. Ooh, the thing is failing me.
Uh-oh, I heard a beep. Not sure what that means. There we go. So some online resources, the Learn Genetics University of Utah. I actually should have checked this link before the presentation and I didn't. So I will check the link to make sure that it's still working. But I found that this is a nice, useful site for some of the genetics problems. And I'm sure most of you are aware of Bozeman Science, Paul Anderson at Bozeman Science. If we were all together right now, face to face, I'd probably have a lot of head nods because he's pretty popular in the science world. He is a high school AP teacher up in Montana. He's got some great resources, some great videos. I will even send some of my freshman students who are struggling with specific concepts. I will send them, of course, they come and ask me questions, but if they need additional help, I will send them to Bozeman Science to kind of give them a nice foundation and a nice platform to start with and build upon. The CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and also the World Health Organization. I list these on the online resources for biology because one of the sections, one of the categories or topics that are on the test are about diseases. And so those are great places to go to learn about quite a few diseases. Hopefully you've been there recently. You've probably seen all the COVID stuff on there. But there will be other stuff, of course, not just COVID coming out. I think that's it for biology.
So chemistry, really, you can use any textbook. The best textbook is the one that the student finds most readable. And what I list here is some of my favorites. Nivaldo Tro, these are the last 3 editions of his book. I'm like 3 editions behind on all of my chemistry textbooks. I find Tro to be the most readable for me. He's very complete, very easy to understand. I like this book a lot. I think this is the top-selling college chemistry textbook. With good reason, it's a very good book. But you may not find these used at half-price books or something like that. I've never seen one there. But if you can get your hand on Tro, give them a try. I like this book a lot. Zumdahl, this guy Stephen Zumdahl has written like 7 different chemistry textbooks. He's written one for high school. I think he's written one for AP level high school. He's written a 1-semester college course, a full-year college course. There's Zumdahl and Zumdahl, which he wrote with his wife. There's Zumdahl and DeCoste, and I think there's a Zumdahl and DeCoste. There's just, if you search for Zumdahl, you'll find like a whole list of chemistry books. Also, one of his older editions has been turned into a PDF that's been leaked online. I don't know if it's legal or not, but if you search for Zumdahl free PDF, you may find one of his entire textbooks in PDF format. It's one of the older editions, but that doesn't matter. We used to use this one, the one with the swirly cover. We used that at UT. That was the last textbook we used at the University of Texas. What we use now is an online ebook, and I'll show you that in a minute here. But any of these Zumdahl books are fine. You can, if you're in the Austin area, you may find these at half-price books because there were so many of them out there and then we quit using them. And I think a lot of them ended up at half-price books. You may also find them throughout Texas. The book we used a couple books back from Zumdahl was written by Ray Davis. He was a UT professor. We used this book for years, and again, I'm a few editions behind. There may even be a newer edition of this book out. Witten, Davis, Peck, and Stanley. I like this book a lot. The reason we quit using it when Ray Davis retired, the department stopped using his book, and it was because the students who did well in high school chemistry, they got to UT and they saw the textbook and it was really familiar to them. It felt really comfortable. So what happened was the students didn't study. And they did fine in the first semester of chemistry, but by then they had developed these terrible study habits for chemistry. And when we got to spring semester and the material that wasn't covered in high school, those students got killed. So this book, Witten, Davis, Peck, and Stanley, I think it's a college level textbook, but it seems more friendly toward high school level students. So if you've got an advanced high school student, this might be a good textbook for them. Now, I don't like everything they do. So I like to do things the easiest way possible. And some of the things that they do in this textbook are not done the easiest way possible. The way they balance redox reactions, for example, kept me completely confused all through college. Well, I should say my freshman year of college. because there's an easier way to do it. So I teach the easier way, but it's a good book. This is a good book, and I think this might be a more approachable book for high school students. But really, what you want to do is find any chemistry textbook that the student can relate to, that the student gets, and use that one. It doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter how old it is. Online resources. Oh, and I should mention too, one of my favorite resources for students to use is if you go to a used bookstore, Half Price Books or something, and you find those study guides, like an AP test study guide, or some of those little books that they focus on problem solving. And that's a really good diagnostic way for a student to go through, work some problems, find out what they know and what they don't know, and then focus on their weaker areas. So any of those Barron's study guides or things like that for chemistry, and they're usually smaller, soft cover books, and you can get them at Half Price Books for $6 or $8. Textbooks, a full textbook at Half Price Books is about $15. So those are good resources. So online, we have this site we call GChem, the University of Texas GChem site. If you just type GChem into Google and hit return, it'll come up. It's not a complete textbook. What it does, it's like a bare bones electronic textbook that only covers what we cover in our general chemistry classes. So it's not a complete textbook by any stretch, but it's a nice, narrowly focused website that students can go to. It's nicely organized. They can click through and do, one section a day or one section every couple days. There are not problems to solve, but there are some problem-solving videos built in. So it's a nice site students can go to for free. OpenStax Chemistry and Chemistry LibreTexts, those are full-on textbooks. They go all the way into the theory. They're much more involved than our GChem site is, and they're also free. So I use OpenStax and Chemistry LibreTexts a lot myself when I'm looking for other explanations, ways that I can explain things to students. And by the way, I never take problems out of any of these. I have a stack of about 16 general chemistry textbooks. I will never take a problem right out of a textbook and put it on a test. First of all, it's illegal because it's copyrighted. Second of all, they are all on chegg.com. If you pick, my experience has been, pick any chemistry problem from any chemistry text and start typing it into Google, you're going to get a hit on Chegg. So I don't take anything out of the textbooks because they're already online, they're already answered online. I make up my own questions. Now, some of them are going to be, what's the molecular weight of this compound? Some of them are going to be fairly straightforward. But as we get deeper into the contest, you'll see that these problems are very uniquely worded, and they're not the kind of problems that you're going to find on Chegg. Physics, David.
All right, so I know someone in chat asked about getting middle school students prepared for coming into the high school contests. This is a way to do it, at least for physics. The first book that I recommend, so many students haven't had physics until their junior or even senior year, so they're coming into this contest, they don't really even know the subject well. Maybe they had an IPC class, maybe they didn't, but this is a good way to get them started. The books by Hewitt, Conceptual Physical Science is kind of a lower level one that a middle school student could handle what's in there. An advanced 8th grader could handle what's in conceptual physics, as well as 9th graders. The reason I like these books is it kind of stays away from the really hard math. It kind of keeps the math at an algebra, but a very simple algebraic level. You don't get into trigonometry as much. You don't get into calculus at all. And so it's a really good book for understanding the concepts of physics and not getting just bogged down in equations. So anytime you have a student who's a freshman, 8th grade, even 7th grade, and you want to get them started on learning about the physics portion of the test, these are the books to go to. Now, Brian, if we go to the next one. Okay, so once they get past Hewitt and you move on to slightly more advanced subjects, and these are probably students who are in physics in high school, not necessarily in AP physics, but they're already in a physics class or have already taken one, you can move up to the college physics textbooks. Now, this is where I tell everybody there's a secret code in the world of physics books. there are physics books that are college physics, and there are physics books that are university physics. And the difference is calculus. If it says college physics, then it is a non-calculus based book. It relies on algebra and trigonometry only, and you won't have any calculus in there. If it says university physics or physics for engineering or fundamentals of physics, it's got calculus in it. So you want to find, for most of your students, you want to find a college physics type book. This group here, this is just 3 of them. There's bunches of them. Again, like Brian said earlier, just whatever book works best for your students, that's the best book to use. I personally have found these 3 to be better for my students as they come in as freshmen. They take the first semester of physics. These tend to do better for explaining things. Giancoli is very popular. There's even AP courses in high school that use that one. Survey is another one that I feel like writes very well for these kinds of things. And most of these also have a calculus-based physics book. So, Brian, thank you. This is where you get to the calculus-based. You'll see Survey there. Physics for scientists and engineers. Again, if it's got the engineering term in it, it's going to be calculus-based. Fundamentals of physics, university physics. These are, because they're calculus-based, these are higher level. The problems are going to be harder. The explanations are going to be more in depth. But if you have a student who as a senior is also taking calculus, or even some pre-calculus level material, then these books might be good for them. The first 2 there, Young and Friedman and Survey, are fairly readable. They have their limits. The last one there, Halliday, Resnick, and Walker, is probably one of the hardest textbooks you could use in a freshman level college course, but it's extremely thorough. So if you've got one of those students who's just really wanting to learn more and more and more, that's a good book to go to for that little extra bit of detail. But I would not throw Halliday at a student who's not already up there in the calculus level, because they rely on that math a lot in that book. Okay. Let's see oh yes. So once you have the students that are interested in physics, obviously the students that are, all of them taking the science test, they're interested in STEM, they're interested in the sciences. They might not be specifically interested in physics, but occasionally you will have one of those students who is. And if they want something additional to read, that's not just a bunch of math, that kind of has more of the concepts in it, then this is a good series. The Feynman Lectures on Physics. This is actually lectures from Richard Feynman from Caltech from back in the 1960s. And they're excellent lectures. They do expect a certain level, so you have to have already had an introductory physics course to be able to even read these, but they don't get bogged down in the math. They have good explanations. I find the 3rd one on quantum mechanics to be particularly valuable, because most textbooks, the previous textbooks, don't really address quantum physics very effectively, but the Feynman lectures do a great job. It's volume 3. Volume 1 and 2 is mechanics and then electricity, magnetism. And in volume 3, he addresses quantum mechanics and does the best job you will ever find anywhere on that one. Okay, and then, yes, some of the free online materials. OpenStax is what we use now. We used to use Survey. I used Giancoli for a long time. I have used Halliday and Resnick once upon a time. What we use now for all of our physics classes here are the OpenStax physics textbooks, because they're free, and college students like things that are free. So, and we like for them to have their textbook, which they won't always buy if it's not free. So this time we switched over to OpenStax for all of that. they're very good books. They're constantly being updated, but for Physics 1, Physics 2 level type things, they're really, really good. They have some good problems in them. I don't take directly from those problems, but good practice problems for the students. And then there's some interactive, there's a lot of websites out there that have interactive physics, you know, basically virtual labs. These are just a couple of them. The Compadre site was put together by the American Association of Physics Teachers. So it's been vetted. It's got correct explanations for everything in there. And it's got some good demonstrations and some little bit of interactive material the students can do, kind of online lab type material. Okay. Ah, yes, the astronomy. So there's always one question from astronomy. It's question number 4 on every single one of these physics lists of questions. And most of those questions you can find the answers to by actually just watching PBS. Just watch NOVA or The Elegant Universe or something like that, and you'll get the answers to those questions. But if you want to go in and read a little bit more, the astronomy books, a couple of them here, 21st Century Astronomy is what we have used in the past for teaching our astronomy classes. OpenStax is what we switched to. Again, it's a free textbook, so we tend to switch to the free textbooks. I'm teaching astronomy actually this summer, and I'm using the OpenStax Astronomy. So it's a good book. It's thorough, and the nice thing about OpenStax is it's constantly being updated, because astronomy actually changes fairly rapidly. So you want something that's being updated. You don't want things that are 10 years old because they're wrong now, because it's actually a field that's still very dynamic. So the OpenStax has been very good for that sort of thing. And then the book. Oh, can I get, it's almost vanishing. I can't quite see it. It keeps half vanishing, half appearing, half not appearing. I don't know. I can't make it. Here we go. 7 Brief Lessons on Physics by Carlo Rovelli. This is the directed reading for this year. The first 3 questions on every physics portion of the UIL tests come from chapters out of this book, and I have the breakdown later in this session, or in tomorrow's sessions. I go through the breakdown very carefully. This book is actually very thin. It's a total of, let's see, 79 pages for 7 chapters. So they're about 10 pages, a little over 10 pages per chapter. This is not a hard read. It says 7 brief lessons. It's really kind of a taste of 7 lessons. And then if you get interested in one of these topics, you can run off and learn more. It's not a complete lesson. It was actually written originally as sort of newspaper type articles. So this was sort of an article that was put out there, but it's got some really good sort of up-to-date points on modern physics and some of the recent developments. I think the students will like it. I think they'll also like that it's pretty quick read, but that's the first 3 questions out of physics on every one of them. That's the book that those questions will come from. Okay. I'll hand it off to either Brian or Michelle.
I can take over. So we had mentioned several textbooks, and we've also been mentioning, do you need those exact texts, and where can you find these things? And so this slide 10 is the FAQs on the specific textbooks. Do you need to actually get these exact texts? Well, I can't speak today. And the answer is not necessarily, and I will just repeat what my other 2 co-test writers here, or co-directors said. It is the best textbook to get is the one that the student finds the easiest to read and the most informative for them, the one that they're working out of the best. Does it need to be the same edition? That depends on the subject line, I think. What I'm hearing Dr. Bixler say is that for astronomy, probably the more updated, since that's dynamic. For some of the basics of biology, Not so much if we're talking about biotechnology or taxonomy, then the more recent editions are going to be more important. And then in chemistry, there's probably areas that are dynamic. I'm not sure. Brian's sort of head bobbing and I don't really know.
Took me a minute to get unmuted. No, any chemistry book from the past 15 or 20 years is going to be just fine.
Does the text matter? Sure. I mean, to some degree, obviously you want something, again, that your student is going to benefit the most from. And so more readability would probably be better. What about other texts? There are lots of other ones out there. If you find something that works for you and you find that it's very beneficial for the student, then absolutely. So we've mentioned half-price books before, online booksellers. You could maybe even do some interlibrary loans. And then you could always Google a free biology textbook, for example. There are biology textbooks on OpenStax as well. I always forget to put that into the PowerPoint, but you could also go there for biology. And the same is true for physics and chemistry as well.
I've found by Googling free chemistry textbook, I found quite a few textbooks that way. And one of them I know, the publisher, and I don't know who the publisher was, they redacted the publisher and the author name and everything, but they had this plan to release the chemistry textbook as a public domain book. And then they were going to sell workbooks to accompany it. And since everybody was using the free textbook, they were going to make a mint selling these workbooks to go along with it. But it didn't work out that way. They released the textbook and everybody didn't start using it. But once you release something to the public domain, you can't take it back. So this textbook is still out there. It has the publisher's name and the author's name redacted, but there is a book out there. If you Google free chemistry textbook, you may find that textbook out there, and it's a perfectly usable textbook. And again, it's whatever the student is able to read and be comfortable with, that's what they want to be using. It doesn't have to be the latest and the greatest. It can be anything that they're actively learning from. That's what you want to encourage. All right, I'll just keep talking since Michelle muted her mic. The UIL Academics homepage, we're going to have our notes from the contest directors posted there. That'll always give you a little bit of insight into what we're doing. You'll find the videos from these Zoom sessions will be posted there. So if you go to the academics, there's going to be a link for STEM, or you can just Google UIL Science, hit return, and it'll take you right there. The physics book that everybody should read for doing the physics part, the 7 brief lessons, there it is, 7 brief lessons on physics. That information is posted on the website. All right. So contest strategies, watch units. A lot of times, you know, you're calculating grams per mole and the problem gives you grams and moles, and you divide one by the other to make the units work, and that's how you get the right answer. So a lot of times you can use the units to guide you and make sure you're working in the right units, because if your units are not working out, you know your answer is wrong. Make diagrams with labels. David Bixler emphasizes this because every year we have students who are drawing some kind of physics diagram and they draw it the size of their thumbnail and it can barely read their own diagram. You get all the paper you want. Draw a nice big diagram that you can label things and see clearly what you're doing.
Yeah, don't get me started on this one because I hate it when one piece of scratch paper comes with the test and it's got 13 little tiny diagrams on it, little force diagrams and little, oh my goodness, people. It should be loud and proud and gigantic. So lots of big diagrams, lots of labels. You will make your life a whole lot easier. And the student should know paper is not an issue. They will have as much as they want. So
look for order of magnitude answer. Sometimes you have an idea of how big an answer should be. Even if you don't know how to do the problem, you might have an idea of how large the answer should be. It says work backwards. Sometimes it's easier to work a problem backwards. Some of these problems, shh, don't tell anyone, except you're going to tell your students, I know you are. Sometimes it's easier to solve a problem if you can't solve it forward. You only have 5 answer choices. Take your 5 answer choices and work backwards. Sometimes that's easier. Sometimes trial and error will get you to the right answer if you don't know how to do the problem going forward, the brute force method. Problem identification, identifying a problem as quick and easy or moderate or hard, because you don't want to get stuck on problem number 5 that's really, really hard, and you spend 30 minutes doing it, and then you don't get to finish the other 15. That usually won't happen with us, but it could, depending on a student's preparation in different areas of each subject matter. So if they don't know how to do a problem, skip it. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Do the ones you can do first, and then go back and do the others that are going to take you more time. I intentionally put some problems on the test that take a lot of time to do. And that's one way to make a test harder, is you put a longer problem on there, because the students who are more skilled in what they're doing can do it more quickly and do the rest of the problems. And the students who aren't as skilled are going to take more time, and they won't get all the problems right because they've spent so much time on that one problem. So I, on purpose, make some problems take a longer amount of time to do, so that I can help differentiate the students who have a mastery versus the students who are still learning that stuff. I've got things popping up on my screen here. So the student should evaluate if a problem looks easy or moderate or hard, and do the ones accordingly. Make sure you can do as many as you can do. You don't want to not finish and then find out that problem 20 was easy. You could have done it like that, and you just lost 6 points because you never got to it. So know when to skip and when to come back, and when to guess and when not to guess.
And one thing I will say in the problem identification part, just because a problem is really long on the paper doesn't mean that it's a difficult problem necessarily. We just maybe need to give you some background and give the students some background information first, or maybe not. Some of that might even be a little bit of fluff, a little bit of storytelling, and it's not really necessary to solve the problem. So I wouldn't avoid the problems. I wouldn't tell students to avoid the problems that are really lengthy. Again, it might just be some extra information there that's not needed.
And I'll do that too. I'll give some context to a problem and then ask the problem. And that'll make the problem appear longer, but it really isn't. All right. You guys want to do this? Or you want me to do it? I'll do it.
I can do it. So some coaches and team suggestions. Obviously, setting goals for your students is going to be really helpful. I think setting individual goals maybe for the student. There might be students that are coming in that are strong in biology. There might be those that are coming in that are strong in physics or chemistry. So setting those individual goals is important, and then having them kind of work together to help each other in the areas where maybe they are, one student is more strong and another student is weaker. Having students solve old contests, either the UIL contests or the TMSCA contests, and there are other problems you can probably find out there in the great internet. So solving those old contests, I will tell you that David Bixler, you've been doing this 1 year longer than me, and I never remember how many years I've been doing this. I have to count my UIL shirts to remember, and we didn't get one this year. So I don't know.
I think five years I've done.
I think this is my 5th year.
So this is my 6th, yeah.
That's your 6th year, yeah. So if you find the high school, there's one high school, I think it's Ennis, is that correct? Shake your head, okay. That has all of these UIL tests posted. If you go back past the point of when before we started doing this, you're going to probably have a lot different style of the problems and a lot different situation, especially where the calculators were concerned and the types of problems that were being asked. So please be aware that if you go back too far, that may not be as helpful. It may be a little bit more discouraging for students with some of those harder problems. Practice contest is posted on UIL invitational meet sites or attend TMSCA contests. Any kind of exposure that you're giving the students is going to be beneficial. If possible, you could coordinate with other teachers. There might be an area that as a teacher you're weaker in. Perhaps you're only teaching biology, but you're the UIL science coach, and so you're having to also teach these UIL students physics and chemistry. So getting those other teachers involved in this could help. You could always reach out to us. You can find our emails on the STEM UIL page. So if you have any questions about something in particular, you could always reach out to us as well. And then food, where there's food, they will come, usually. Food is always good. We tell the students that, you know, they're going to have a lot of opportunity in college to get a lot of free food, because there's usually those student organizations will have free food for people. So food is always a good motivator. And then, of course, lots of positive reinforcement. You guys have anything to add to that?
It is Ennis. I just went to their site. They've only got 2017 and older on their site. So 2017, 2016, those are pretty useful. Anything older than about 2016 gets back to when graphing calculators were allowed. So the physics problems will be much, much harder on those older tests. So you probably want to avoid, or not avoid, but you look at the questions and be like, pick out a few of the easier ones and not necessarily use all of them.
But I bet the
probably the same way.
The invitational exams are probably good going all the way back, because they tend to be introductory stuff, at least for chemistry, they would be.
True. That's probably true for physics as well, but certainly the district and regional and state, back those older ones are going to be very hard.
Yeah, I think the invitationals will probably be the best bet for those tests that are the older ones.
Yeah.
Or before 2016.
Okay, you ready, Michelle?
I'm ready. Am I sharing my screen?
If you want to.
Keep doing it. Okay, so there's some main topics in biology. There are actually 10 topics. If you recall, there are 20 biology questions. This means that there are usually 2 questions from each topic area. And that's going to be true for the invitational, the district, the region test. Where things start to get a little trickier is a state test, because there's a lot of overlap with topic areas with some of those questions. And so that might be a little bit more iffy. So you can see the topics. A few years ago, we added diseases, and that was sort of a big hit, and we'll continue on with diseases. And go ahead and flip to the next one. The 3 levels of questions that I've kind of identified are knowledge and comprehension type questions. These are the basic, it's advanced recall and identification of subject matter, but these are kind of the basic, maybe definition type questions where a student is needing to know specific terms in order to answer the question. Application and analysis is more quantitative reasoning. The bulk of the test will be from levels 1 and 2. I have it broken down actually 75% from levels 1 and 2 and 25% from level 3, which is synthesis and evaluation, which is using a lot more information and prior knowledge in order to come to conclusions or even generate hypotheses from what's happening. I like to say that 25% of the test, which is 5 questions on the test, is coming from level 3. The reality is that on the invitational test, it's probably not 75-25 even split like that. The invitational tests probably have more from levels 1 and 2, and maybe only 2 or 3 questions from level 3. By the time we get to the state test, it's generally flipped, where there might be maybe 12 questions, or maybe more than that, maybe 13 or 14 questions from levels 1 and 2, and then the remaining that might be from level 3. And that's just because of the nature of the test. In general, they're going to get harder. You can go ahead and flip for me. So all topics will be covered on all of the exams. The level of the content, as I've already mentioned, 75% from levels 1 and 2 from the previous slide, and then 25% from level 3. And then of course the relative difficulty for each test is going to increase. So what might be considered a level 1 question on the invitational is not going to be the same difficulty as a level 1 question on the state test.
All right, so chemistry, we've got 13 topic areas, and these reflect the 13 topic areas that we cover in a full year of general chemistry at the University of Texas. And these are going to be described in more detail in the director's notes online. So you'll know exactly, there's a long breakdown of what's included under each one of these headings. All of these topics are going to be on all of the exams. So there's going to be at least 1 question from each one of these on each exam. Electrochemistry and kinetics. A lot of times on the invitational exam, you'll see a definition question, because I know these topics, especially electrochem and kinetics, they come so late in the year, if they're covered at all, that when I ask you a definition question, that's a hint that there's something coming on a later exam, and you're going to need to know what that word means. In a kind of a breakdown here, the invitational exams are very introductory level. The calculational problems are usually one-step calculations. Look for trends in the problems. When I talk about the chemistry exam in detail next Wednesday, we'll talk about how I like to scaffold problems, and I like to have the same problem getting increasingly more difficult as you move further into the contest. So you can kind of see where a direction of where some things are going if you look for trends in the problems. And if you see a definition question, you're going to need to know what that word means on a later exam. That's the only reason I ask a definition question. District, the questions go deeper into the subject matter. There will be some on there that will be covered in high school chemistry. You might see one or two on there that maybe you wouldn't cover in high school chemistry. The problems become more complex. Some of them are two-step calculations, three-step calculations. I like to ask problems where I give you some information and I ask you a question, and it's not immediately apparent how you get from that information to that answer. You need to think about things a little bit. It might be a two-step calculation where you're going to be using a couple of different equations. So it's not just one step to the answer. And then regional and state, the problems get longer and more complex. This is where the questions that come up during my office hours at UT that I can't ask my students, this is where those problems show up on the regional and state tests. A lot of times the approach to solving the problem is not going to be obvious. Sometimes a student might read a question and then see what it's asking for and say, how the heck am I supposed to get that out of this? There's no connection, but there is a connection, but you've got to do some critical thinking to get there. And sometimes the hardest part of the chemistry on the state exam is actually the critical thinking to understand what's going on. We see that at UT as well. The acid-base unit at UT, students have a terrible time with that because a lot of times we don't tell them, here's your solution. We say, okay, you take this solution and add them. Now what's your pH? Well, now they got to figure out what the solution is before they can solve the pH. Calculating pH is easy, but figuring out what's in the solution, that's the hard part. So we'll see more of that on the regional and state level. David.
All right, so first thing I want to point out, there are 18 free points if your students can read. So have your students read the book, get those 18 free points. That's there primarily for students who haven't had any introduction to physics at all. And so all they have to be able to do is read a book and remember a little bit of it, and they can at least get those first three questions. So past those, you get into questions. I'll go through in a moment the details of them, but they're mostly going to be numerical. As you move through, invitational A, invitational B, pretty simple, straightforward. Here's a force, here's a mass, what's the acceleration, kinds of questions. As you move through to regional, district, regional, and state, it becomes more of a, maybe more symbolic. Force F, mass M, what's the acceleration? Okay, so it's going to be algebraic for the answer. And you'll see more conceptual questions, some of them relying on more advanced topics like Gauss's law or Ampere's law, something like that. A few things that are reserved for later, for example, AC circuits. If you really want to solve an AC circuit correctly, you have to use complex numbers. Well, that's going to be pretty much regional and state only. Calculus, I have limited entirely to the state test. So I'm not going to ask, even on the regional exam, I try to stay away from things that require calculus. Now, sometimes the problems could be solved faster if you used calculus on it, but they can still be solved with trigonometry and algebra. They just take a little bit longer. But you have to use calculus on a few of the state exams questions. And then vector notation, just kind of vector algebra, cross products, dot products, things like that. Not going to see that until the state exam as well. But at that point, IJK notation, I sort of expect that those students would know that. Now the breakdown, I think, yes, the next slide gives us the breakdown for the book. So there's 7 chapters because there's 7 brief lessons, and I kind of looked at how to break 7 chapters into 5 tests and came up with this basic breakdown. Invitational A is just going to be from the first couple of chapters, or the first couple of lessons, he calls them. And then we add the third for invitational B, so just a little bit more material there. District repeats that chapter 3, but also now adds 4. Regional will add 5 and 6, and state is the only place where the 7th lesson would be included. So that kind of gives you the idea of the breakdown of the chapters. The kids don't need to read the entire book before the first invitational. They just need to get the first couple of chapters. If they read the entire book before district, they know which 2 chapters to go review, for example. Okay, and then the breakdowns of the questions. So 3 years ago, something like that, something like 3 years ago, I talked to a number of coaches, and we decided, or they were asking about things, you know, what kind of questions could their students do who haven't had physics? And I decided that it might be a good idea if they knew what number was associated with what topic. So I sort of set up this structure, and I've been really happy with it because the students have overall been doing better and have been kind of challenging the physics questions a little bit more whenever it looks like this. The question number tells you what the topic's going to be. So first 3 are from the book. Question 4 is astronomy. And then we start going through physics 1, just like you would in the order of a textbook. Dimensional analysis, significant figures. Question 6, uniformly accelerated motion. So your free fall type problems as well in there. P7, problem number 7 gets you into forces, Newton's laws, the three Newton's laws of forces. Question 8, energy, momentum. Those are your kind of primary conservation laws that would go with question 8. Question 9, a little bit more challenging. That gets into rotational motion. These are places where the students might not be as comfortable if they haven't had a physics class. So they know. Don't even bother reading that one if you haven't studied rotational motion or equilibrium. If you're talking about statics, usually statics is in the invitationals. Motions comes later. Questions 10 and 11, that sort of finishes out physics 1 with your waves and sound, fluids, and a little bit of thermodynamics. And yes, I do overlap a bit with chemistry sometimes here because we also use the ideal gas law, but we try not to duplicate too much. And then starting with question 12, it's physics 2. So DC circuits, these would be batteries and light bulbs kinds of questions for question 12. 13 and 14 are field questions, electric field and magnetic field. Again, those are a little more advanced, those 2 questions being something you'd want to be in a physics class to learn about. Gauss's law and Ampere's law being sort of the penultimate point there, but always involving calculus with those. And then the sort of Faraday's law and induction, which is not terrible, but can involve some calculus, AC circuits, which I'll limit to the later test. And then question 16, this is an easy one. Everybody can do optics. I was even looking at my optics questions from last year and noticing, yeah, in invitationals, it's like a single lens or a single mirror. By the time you get to regional, you're starting to get to multiple elements. So a mirror plus a lens or 2 lenses, something like that. So, but geometric optics is a topic that any student can learn because there's only basically 2 equations to know. And then the end, this is where it gets a little odd. Modern physics, quantum physics, that's something that's not often covered in high school curriculum. And nuclear physics and particle physics, these get a little bit out there. So these are going to read Feynman's lectures, for example, volume 3. It's topics that students would have to really be interested in physics to want to go find those. The questions actually aren't typically that hard. You know, nuclear physics, half-life. If you know that one equation, you can easily figure out those problems. But if you've never looked at it, never seen that exponential decay equation, you're not going to know what to do with those types of questions. 19 and 20, I call them wild card. Physics 1 wild card and Physics 2 wild card. Those questions have evolved into lab questions. So question 19 is a Physics 1 lab question. Here is data you collected. Tell me what happened, or something like that. A standard one would be something like you rolled a cart down a ramp and you collected data on its velocity at different points on the ramp, and tell me what you calculate for the gravitational acceleration, something like that. Question 20 is the same kind of lab questions, but from Physics 2 topics. So you get into things like, here's the current and the voltage. You set a voltage, here's the current flowing in the circuit. You change the voltage, here's the new current. So you have a set of data, voltage versus current, and I want to know what's the resistance of the object in the circuit. So still reliant on understanding the basic formulas, but always given in terms of sort of lab data. I've enjoyed that. The students seem to enjoy that as well, because it has that practical side of things to it. So that gives you a breakdown. Tomorrow I'll go into much more detail on those 20 types of questions and how exactly they're broken down.
And I think that's it. Let's see. That's it. All right. So we're back to, are we back to full screen? Speaker view. All right, we're on, David.
All right. Well, thank you all for an awesome presentation. As we've mentioned a couple times through the session, we do have sessions on each subject area coming up. Physics tomorrow, chemistry next week, and then biology the following week on Monday the 29th. So lots of good information today, and a chance to delve more deeply into each specific subject area as we go. We did have one question earlier in the session, just kind of generally talking about middle school students and how to help prepare them for coming into the high school contest. And Dr. Bixler covered a little bit about that during some of his comments. I will mention that we do have as part of our A+ academics program, we do include our Science 1 and Science 2 contests that are based on the 7th and 8th grade curriculum. And so if you are at a junior high or middle school and are involved in that UIL academic program for those grade levels, we do have a science contest there. And that can be one way to help your students kind of get started on that path. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Is there anything else from any of our contest directors that you'd like to add before we sign off?
I would just like to tell everybody thank you for being here. I wish we could all see you in person, maybe next year.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. Definitely hope so. We mentioned at the very beginning the calendar, and as of now, we've not made any further changes to the UIL calendar beyond what is currently posted as our tentative list. Of course, everything is kind of wait and see what happens as we go, but we are certainly very hopeful to be able to move forward with our full slate of activities for the coming school year. So we will definitely keep working on that and post updates as we go. Well, thank you again to everyone for being here today. Keep an eye on the session scheduled for the weeks ahead. We'll be continuing to offer them on into July, and we will see you hopefully for physics tomorrow.